The other problem with Don't Ask, Don't Tell is you have to actually not ask. And it was very easy for my partner to not ask about my relationships and my sexual encounters, but she was very interested in my life. She wanted to know what I was doing. So she'd constantly, when I'd come home, be like, all right, who did you see? And what were you doing? And what was going on? And that was really sweet and really loving and also really frustrating because it forced me to lie. It put me in a position where I was forced to lie out of respect for our relationship and our rules.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 187. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have a fun interview with Norm.
Yeah, this is, I love this interview for a lot of different reasons. Norm is so positive. He loves living life. He'll tell us that right at the beginning. He is was in a Don't Ask, Don't Tell for quite a while and has sort of been exploring not quite a mono-poly dynamic. I don't know. He'll explain it better, but it is a fantastic conversation, especially for all of the guys out there who think that like dating is super hard and they just can't get any traction. Norm has a ton of strategies. He has, I'd say a ton of success. Mm-hmm. For a single guy, well, not single, for a guy who's on his own and also married and also can't talk about his wife. I don't know. He's got a lot of challenges and has had a lot of success. So thank you for being here, Norm. Thank you for sharing everything with us. We're excited to get your story out there. And yeah, just thank you.
Before we jump into the show, a couple of quick announcements. We did have our meet and greet in June. It was awesome. Actually, it's still June when this is coming out. I feel like it's already July, but July is coming very, very soon.
It is.
Our meet and greet in June was amazing. And just a heads up, we are taking a little bit of time off from the meet and greets, from the virtual meet and greets. So there will not be one in July just because of summer schedules. But don't worry, they will be back and we will be announcing the next one very soon.
Yeah, it'll either be in August or September. We're not totally sure. So stay tuned for that, and we're excited for it.
We also wanted to give you a heads up on our upcoming Patreon calls. We'll talk about more about Patreon in the outro, but just so you know, we have Patreon calls this month in July. July 20th will be the women's call, July 21st will be the men's call, and July 28th will be the monthly Q&A. So jot those dates down, and again, they're on our website too. And
just a huge thank you to all of the patrons. We're over 170 now,
Woohoo!
So that's super exciting, and just, a huge debt of gratitude and thanks to everyone for being a part of that community and for giving us the love and support, both for the show and just in our personal lives. We've gotten a lot out of it, so thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
One last thing, maybe before we let you go, is STD Check. It is the way that we get tested for STIs. We absolutely love it. We've used it for years. It's fast, it's simple, and it's even more affordable now than it's ever been. They knocked $60 off the price, so it's $130 for a 10-panel test. If you use the links on our website, you save $10 and you support the show. And we would just say a huge thank you to everybody who has used that. And if you are somebody who has used it and loved the service and you want to leave us a voicemail, please do that. And we will hook you up with some type of awesome goodie bag. We've got all sorts of stuff. We got condoms and lube and books from people. We've got stuff. So we would love to get some voicemails from you to tell everybody else how awesome you thought STD Check was or is, that we can use here in the intro so you don't have to listen to us talk about it.
Right, exactly. So if you want to leave us a voicemail, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, click on the Contact Us button, and you'll see there it's super easy to leave us a voicemail. While you're on our website, you can also find links to the discount codes for STD Check. You can also find podcast show notes, and
you can reach out to us for any reason. It doesn't have to just be for STD Check. Send us an email, send us a voicemail, and just thank you for listening, and we will see you on the other side of this conversation with Norm.
Yeah, let's go. Welcome, Norm, to the show. We're so happy to have you here, and we're so happy you reached out to us. I know that you sent us a lengthy email with your story, and we're so excited to get this out there and have you share your story as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, and thank you for the podcast. I enjoy it as a listener, and I've learned a lot, and I hope I have something to share.
Yeah.
Well, based on what we heard, that won't be an issue.
No.
So thank you, as Emma said. And do you mind introducing yourself so we can learn a little more about who you are and then dive into what are you doing here? What are you doing in general, but what are you doing here, right?
Yes, my name is Norm. I love life, and I love living it. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, and I am happily married to a wonderful woman who is herself monogamous, and I am by nature, I guess, polyamorous, but we have found ourselves in an open relationship for most of our time together, and that kind of is what brought me here today to talk about this model, which I think is one that can work for a lot of people, but is not often explored out of fear and out of the challenge of an initial conversation that nobody wants to have.
Right.
Yeah, and that sort of mono-poly dynamic has a lot of, I'd say, maybe minds to navigate.
Yeah.
And so we're excited.
Non-monogamy in general does, and then add that dynamic. There's even more complicated.
So we're excited to have you here to hear about it. I guess maybe before we go back in time and figure out how we got here, can you explain a couple of things? One, what your dynamic looks like with your wife, and also maybe verify for us. We know this is true, but the listeners love to hear it, that she has provided consent to you to be here sharing anything you want. Well, maybe not anything, anything you two have discussed, and that everything is good to go there.
Yes, she has consented to my being here, and part of the conversation will be about, or part of our experience is about the transition in our relationship from open and talking about it to a don't ask, don't tell, and now transitioning back to being open and talking about it again. I'm pleased to say that we were able to have a good conversation about our relationship recently and about my being here. And she wasn't able to join me, but she's open to hearing what I have to say.
Yeah,
good.
Well,
thank you for clarifying that.
We love that, and a thank you to her for giving her blessing. So, yeah. So, take us back to the beginning. When did you start learning about or exploring non-monogamy on your own, or as a couple? Perhaps.
Well, I guess we'll start really as a child or a teenager, because intellectually, even though I came from a traditionally successful, family, my parents stayed together my mom's entire life, and they had what I believed to be a monogamous relationship. I always knew that there was just something, or I felt there's something biologically strange and flawed around our traditional marriage model, i.e. lifelong monogamy. So it was always something that kind of bothered me as a teenager, and I was looking for alternative models but didn't really know them and didn't really see them, besides the Dan Savage column in the back of The Stranger. And, just a little outlet for there is something else out there. So it was always something in the back of my mind. And as I dated, I was awkward as a teenager and I didn't date much, so it wasn't really an issue. And then my first serious relationship, soon out of college, was with a girl who I was deeply in love with, but was truly out of my league. She was out of my league in terms of looks. She was out of my league in terms of experience. She was out of my league in terms of age. And even from the first day I met her, I was constantly competing with other men for her attention. And we were living in an intentional community. And there were a couple of guys in that community who were constantly flirting with them. And one of the men had a copy of The Ethical Slut on his bedstand, and she got very excited by it, started reading it, started asking him questions, and eventually came to me and said, "I'd like to sleep with him. How do you feel about this?" So, intellectually, I had prepared myself for this. I always said to myself, sex and love are not necessarily mutually interdependent. They often are, but they can also be separate. And I knew intellectually that the answer had to be yes. But I was young and I was in love and I was heartbroken because it was the first time that I'd had to really deal with this question. What does this say about me? What does this say about our relationship? What does this say about how good I am in bed? All those really self-doubting questions. And so I went through a hard couple days, and I eventually said yes to her, but really reluctantly. And she saw that, and I really thank her for this, that even with the permission, she didn't go forward knowing how much it would hurt me. And I regret that I held her back from that in retrospect. But at the same time, that was kind of the process. We talk about the conversations that need to happen and the process, right? This whole thing is about the conversations and about acceptance and about understanding. And if you don't let your partner go through that, then and get to the right place, then you're not going to have a successful model. And she let me go through that, and she let this opportunity go aside. And then a few months later, when we were living in different places, she asked again if she could have, I guess, a hall pass, it's now called. And so she had a very fun summer at camp. I think it was with a number of men. I did not have such success, but and but by that point I was ready for it, and I accepted it. And also the situation made it a lot easier to accept than the first time being when we're all living in a small home together.
When she came back from camp, I'm just curious, did you two stay together? And I guess, was that the first time you saw this model work, where she was able to have whatever number of experiences, and then you two continued your relationship and carried on?
Yes, absolutely. We were together for a number of years, on and off. I mean, we had other challenges in our relationship, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you successful. The conversation around sex and things just becomes a hot button topic that exposes everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we were able to get past that, certainly, and I was able to look past it, and it was never an issue in our relationship, but it never also became, we didn't reopen up. We came back together. We went back to a monogamous setting because we were in place together. So it didn't become an ongoing concept in our relationship. It was, for a time and a place while we were away,
sure,
etc.
Mm-hmm.
But it also kind of laid the foundation of, right? You have now done, what you did is something that would blow most guys' minds, right? My partner went away, had sex with some number of men, came back, and we continued our relationship, and we were good for a number of years afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it definitely gave me the solidity to know that it can happen, that those fun experiences were fun experiences. She had a great time, and she chose to come back and be with me. And that if she had, I watched friends break up all over the place. She could have not been with anybody and have not chosen to come back with me. That may have actually made it easier for her to come back to be with me, because she wasn't forced to choose between fun and sex in the moment and her long-term love. And so I think that was an important lesson that I learned from that it actually can strengthen your relationship when you're not forced to make choices that really are not equivalent choices and shouldn't be forced upon us, I don't think.
Yeah, and I agree completely. And I think there's one other super important lesson that came out of this, which is really that there is no such thing as being out of someone's league, and that she had the opportunity to go and do whatever with whoever, and came back to you. It had nothing to do with all of the things that you named. It was because of who you are. And so I wanted to throw that out there, that the whole idea of like, you're out of my league is just kind of, I think it's, I don't know. We see people all the time, and we've seen this as we've moved through non-monogamy, where you see a couple and like on the surface, you're like, there's like a disparity of whatever kind, height, weight, looks, whatever. And it's all so subjective that you're like, people just like are in love with other people, and it just doesn't matter. So that's, I don't know, my own little diatribe. I apologize.
No, and I completely agree, of course. And as I've gone on in life, you see that more and more. I think there's something in your teens and 20s where there's a bit of a sense of that, and then as you date, you realize what's actually important. And as you get into the swinger scene and some of the casual sex scenes, you become even more aware that it's not about body types and looks. It's really about energy and fun and your ability to connect with people, and your confidence. And we'll get into some of that stuff later, but it really is not about those classic traditional levels.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Completely agree. So
as you moved on, I guess, in that relationship, you said you closed back up and were monogamous for a stretch of time. How did your life progress in relationship wise? Or non-relationship wise, whatever you want to share, but
yeah, I mean, I think, that story fizzles out a bit. We go on and off, and it was one of those first deep loves that is, super high and super low, and we both went our separate ways, and we remained friends years later. And we still call each other on birthdays. And when we really want to connect with somebody on a deep level, we often reach out to each other. So, I mean, we went through a lot together. We got to know each other at a really important stage. And then we went our separate ways. And I think that's an important and valid form of relationship. And I treasure it. And I treasure that time we had. And I think I took a little bit of that success into my next few years when I became what I guess at the time people called a serial monogamous. So, dating different women for 3 weeks to 3 months, really throwing myself deeply into connecting and into enjoying them and getting to know them and experiences with them, but never being really looking for larger commitment. Partially that was about location. I was at the time based in New York, and I always saw myself coming back to the Northwest, and didn't necessarily want to drag somebody through that hard decision of having to move across the country, which is a very hard thing. So I just kind of said, this is for now and that's for later. So I started dating more than one person, and just kind of, so that's why, so from that serial monogamy, when I realized I wasn't going to be diving necessarily deep into depth, it became easier to open up the idea to casual dating. And of course I looked around in the New York dating scene, and I realized that casual dating is actually fairly common. And so I started dating more than one person at a time. So these baby steps into the understanding that you can hold people to different levels and have different experiences started at that point. But there were some challenges with dating multiple women at the same time, and I learned a few very important lessons. First one is, don't assume that just because you haven't had the conversation saying that you're monogamous, that the other person you're monogamous. That you should just be upfront. You don't have to be upfront on the very first date that you're a poly by nature or things like that. I mean, that should come out sooner rather than later, I believe. But if you're seeing other people, say it, because if it comes out later, it can be much more disastrous, especially when it turns out that you're dating two women who live on the same block.
Sounds like you might know a thing or two about that.
There was just a time when I just really had a thing for these 2 blocks in New York. And first I dated a woman, then I dated someone who lived 2 stories above her in the same building. And then concurrently I dated a woman who lived 1 block down, all at the same time. And it made for some very awkward moments as we approached back towards the buildings, walking them home at night, trying to kiss them goodnight, but not wanting to hold their hand, having held their hand in public all through the city, but then not wanting to do it on the 1 block in front of their house. So,
did did they know about each other at this point, or was this still when you were kind of like keeping things a little hush hush?
I mean, yes and yes. I think they knew I was dating other people, but didn't necessarily know how serious, and they certainly didn't know that they were neighbors. And I didn't really screen that when I was trying to decide who I was going to date at the same time. I didn't think to myself, oh, no, sorry, you live in the same building as my ex and you live next door. We can't, I have to wait. I have to wait another month or two till I can date you. It just didn't occur to me at the time.
No, I think that's totally legit.
But now with modern technology, I guess you can do a little Google mapping of where all your people are and make sure they're all at least, a 1 mile radius away from each other before you...
Not necessarily a requirement, though, especially in New York City. I mean, you'd be getting pretty far away at that point.
Right?
So, yeah, I love that.
So dating was fun. But after a while, I just had to be quite clear that what I was looking for. And it also became, as big as New York City is, you can get a reputation. And, people started to date me, knew this in advance, that I was known as a player or, people nicely would say a serial monogamist. And at first it offended me. And after a while, I embraced it. I just kind of, okay, yeah, that's who I am. And if you're bothered by it, I may be attracted to you. I may really like you. But if it bothers you that I like women, then clearly we shouldn't be dating. And that's good to know that up front. Instead of creating a whole emotional mess for down the road. So it took a while till it became humorous. At first it was, an impediment and frustrating. But, after a while it kind of was like, all right, this is who I am. I am what you would, I guess, call polyamorous. At the time it was, I felt like a new term back in the mid 2000s in New York City. I'm sure it's been around for decades, but it hadn't made its way. It was just making its way into the general lexicon, and you couldn't go out there and date as poly. There were no poly dating apps. There was no, well, maybe there were poly meetup groups, but I didn't know how to find them.
Right.
And so, I continued to date as a serial monogamous, I guess, but started to understand my position as poly, or at least in a minimum as someone with a high sex drive who's able to separate sex from relationship and wants to be able to explore that. And so I started putting that out front in my conversation, so people knew what they were getting into. And it led to some really fun experiences. Like at the age of 31, when I was dating a 23-year-old, a 33-year-old, and a 43-year-old all at the same time.
That's amazing.
And they were, I love, really, I guess love is the wrong term. I really deeply cared for them all and connected with them all, but on very different levels. They had very different places in life and goals of what they were looking for. And the 43-year-old certainly had no problem with the casual sex, and she was ready, was kind of past the dating stage and was kind of living happily on her own, but wanted some pleasure and some companionship. And so that was a really satisfying thing. The 23-year-old had a certain level of energy and joy and enthusiasm, certainly. And then the 33-year-old turned out to eventually become my wife. So clearly that was the deepest connection, of the bunch. So that really was a good time. It was fun, certainly. But it also, allowed me to, in a more of a casual sense, navigate these conversations, to learn how to say to people up front, this is what I want. My wife, the 33-year-old, we were long distance at the time. So it also allowed for an easier transition into this, because we were both dating other people. Eventually, I said, she is by nature monogamous, and she has not, since we kind of came together more seriously, she has not been with other people. But at the time, she was dating other people as well, and I was too. So it allowed us to establish that connection. And those conversations with other folks really gave me the skills to talk to her. And that time, that long distance time, also gave us the time to kind of to build the emotion without the physical connection, while we were having physical connection with other people. and realized that the emotional connection was the deeper one, even though we were physically both with other people, that our connection was the deeper one. And that was what mattered much more.
Yeah, totally. I have questions about your wife and all that dynamic, but before we get into that, it sounds like you were exploring, polyamory on your own there for a little bit of time. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you encountered in that time, and also some of the maybe learning experiences and what you learned going through that early on.
I certainly broke some hearts, and that was hard. People who got really invested, who maybe I didn't say really upfront, was not quite as transparent about what my goals were, or people who, even if I was transparent about it, were really hurt by the final outcome, got invested, even though I told them not to, or whatever. There are some challenges around public facing. This is always a challenge in a world where most of us who are non-monogamous are not out of the closet. So, when I was getting serious with my wife, and I also had a connection with somebody on a work trip, and I tried very hard to keep our connection secret from the other people because I didn't want to hurt her, and I wasn't necessarily ready to expose my situation. But she really wanted to be public, and she kept forcing it a little bit publicly. And then when a few months later I ended up getting engaged to my wife, she felt hugely betrayed and hugely embarrassed that she had this public thing with somebody who then went and got publicly engaged soon after. So, and I don't have great answers to those. I tried as much as I could to front load it, and I tried to be with partners who understood what I was looking for and understood who I was, but you can't always succeed at knowing who you're picking in any given moment.
In that instance, did the woman that you met on the work trip, she didn't know about your soon-to-be fiance?
She knew about her. She knew I was in a relationship, but I don't think she realized quite how serious it was. Serious enough that I was going to get engaged a few months later. She said, "Oh, well, it must be casual enough that you're with me, right? Here you are.
I gotcha.
We're having this deep connection." So, I think people tell themselves stories, even if you try to tell them your truth, they don't always hear it.
Yes. No, for sure. That's super valid. And I think that's hard, right? Because then you kind of wind up hurting her unintentionally, and while you're also trying to do your best. So I feel for you on that one.
Yeah. That's, I think, the biggest blooper is just trying to navigate the feelings of the majority of the world who doesn't share that. It may be easier now, 20 years later, a little bit, to be a little more open about it, but I still think not in all circles, not in most circles, probably. So you have to be really transparent and really upfront, and just also really sensitive to the fact that you will hurt some people along the way, and try not to be an asshole about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Totally. And likewise, you'll end up getting hurt along the way too, and that's part of the nature of the game, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some of these, I might be saving for bloopers, but I'm also getting to them right now. During that time, in the same year, 2 different single women in their 40s asked me to impregnate them with no expectations of fatherhood. That was a hard phase, right? Being this person who was very open sexually and dating in your 30s to women who were in their late 30s and 40s who are kind of coming to that stage in life where they're realizing that if they want to have kids and they're not going to have a partner, maybe they have to go forward on their own. So it was definitely flattering to be asked. And I struggled with it for a long time because ideologically I really thought it was the right thing to do. These women really wanted to get pregnant. One of them was paying tens of thousands of dollars to do IVF while her and I were then hooking up with a condom on. It seemed ridiculous. But then on the flip side, I just couldn't bring myself emotionally to was not comfortable with the idea of having biological children who I had no relationship with. And I just didn't think I'd be able to play that distant role, and I wasn't willing to play the connected role.
Right.
And both of them have wonderful children now, one through IVF and one through another partner. So it all worked out the best for everybody. But that was certainly an interesting challenge that I was not expecting when I started being more open about my casualness. And the women they were just as open about their casualness. Some of them, they were like, okay, you're right. I'm also casual, and this is what I want. I don't want a partner. I need sperm.
Yeah. I mean,
to navigate those conversations, like you said, I can imagine how it would be easy to struggle with that. Like, just that's a tough one. So
yeah. So how, as you start to progress deeper into the relationship with your wife, your now wife, like you said, you got engaged, and like presumably she knew that you were dating other people. And how did you transition into this marriage while also maintaining your openness? Like, how did this dynamic...
and like knowing she was monogamous minded.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I just put it up front. I don't know, right from the beginning. I said, this is me. I can't see myself having sex with one person for the rest of my life. And I can see myself being emotionally connected with multiple people, but I don't need that. And that's a place where I was willing to compromise. I was willing to give up on the poly idea, and really go emotionally monogamous. But that I knew that it was just setting myself up for failure to make a monogamous commitment. And I was not interested in setting us up for failure. So I said that from the beginning. Again, it helped that we were already dating other people casually when we started. But as we got started, I said, this is, I love you. I want to be with you. I want to build a life with you. But you need to understand that I don't think, 60 years of exclusive sexual interdependency is healthy. And, it bothered her at first, certainly. But she looked to our year apart. She looked to me and our history, and I guess she trusted me enough to go into it. During that first year apart, we did talk about our other relationships and our other encounters. When we got serious, one of her rules was a don't ask, don't tell, right? The DADT. She did not want to know the details of my play. And, we set some pretty strict ground rules to begin with. It was important that it not happen anywhere near our social circle or even in our own city to begin with. And that worked because I traveled a third of the time for work, and I was, able to make that happen. We went through a phase soon after we got married. She asked for a year of sexual exclusivity, and just to give us time to strengthen our bond and our relationship. And that made sense to me. It was a hard year, but it made sense to me. And I respected that. So, it was a conversation from day one, and it was a conversation that never stops. I mean, there's questions. It turns out there are some challenges with don't ask, don't tell. Right. So you think it sounds great because if you don't ask, you don't know anything. But there are a few challenges. The first one is that if you don't know how much someone's with another partner, you assume they're always with another partner. And I was discovering that every time I was going out, she had this fear that I was just going out with somebody else. And she didn't know to what extent that was. Was it just play? Was it relationship? Was it in depth? Right. So her fears were running a little bit wild. So we had to have some conversations to alleviate those fears. To say, when I say I'm going out with this friend, I usually actually am going out with that friend. I only occasionally, I'm going out with somebody else. Like, you can assume that I'm not doing that every time. And, you can just be reassured that I'm not getting into deep emotional connections and things of that nature. So, there were times we had to kind of revisit the conversation on that front. The other problem with Don't Ask, Don't Tell is you have to actually not ask. And it was very easy for my partner to not ask about my relationships and my sexual encounters, but she was very interested in my life. She wanted to know what I was doing. So she'd constantly, when I'd come home, be like, all right, who did you see? And what were you doing? And what was going on? And that was really sweet and really loving and also really frustrating because it forced me to lie. It put me in a position where I was forced to lie out of respect for our relationship and our rules. And, usually I would deflect and I would just, I would play tired or I would whatever, make a quick statement. But yeah, so fortunately, as I mentioned already, we have more recently transitioned out of that. She's come to a place where she's, through her own growth and her own exploration and her own listening to podcasts and reading and whatever, she's ready to start hearing my stories. Not quite ready yet to explore with me. I certainly hope that will happen someday, but I don't know. And that has really been a wonderful advancement in our relationship, the transparency and the ability to one of the beauties of sexual energy is that it begets more sexual energy. And that is, if you are getting that energy and if you're getting that enthusiasm, people think that, if you're going and having sex outside of the relationship, you'll come back and not feel like the need for it back at home. And it's the exact opposite. It's that when you get revved up and you get excitement and you want to bring that back home. And there was always this awkward moment when I would, come back revved up and excited after being with a partner or going to a party and want to come and share that sexual energy with my wife. And I couldn't really translate it. I couldn't really tell her where it was coming from. I couldn't, she wasn't necessarily in the mood for it. So that ability to be more transparent, the ability to actually bring that energy back, to tell stories at whatever level she's comfortable. And sometimes it brings us closer in the moment. And sometimes it leads to a little bit of heartache and challenge because these things are challenging and she's dealing with stuff that she wasn't necessarily, she hadn't wanted to when she first was looking for a partner, but she accepted it with me and now she's, opening up to it. So, even though it's better, it can lead to a couple hard days and hard conversations, certainly. But yeah, that journey and that opening up and understanding of each other more and more has been really delightful. So, if you're listening, wife, thank you for coming on this journey with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I appreciate hearing all of those challenges. I think one that maybe you didn't touch on that I'm curious how you've navigated is, let's say you start talking to someone that's you're interested in and they're interested in you. And now you have to say, well, I'm in an open marriage, but my wife doesn't want to know anything about this. So you can never verify this with her. You just have to completely take my word that I'm doing this on the up and up. And trust me or don't. That's a really tough conversation to have because I think there's a lot of assumptions of he's just a cheating piece of shit husband kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And I do have to deal with that. Dating as a married man, dating as a man is difficult. Dating as a married man is much more difficult. And dating as a married man without my wife's assistance could be almost impossible. Yeah. You just have to be, I think, honest and transparent and truthful. And I think it comes across. I think, even through text and I guess first public screening dates or whatever, I think people can get a sense of whether or not you're being honest about it. I have a post, that I've used over the years that I really like the title of, and I think it draws in the right people. The title of my ad was always "Happily Married Man Looking for Additional Happiness."
I like that.
Yeah.
And I think, it didn't get me a lot of attention, but it got me the right kind of attention, from poly people or from people who understood where we were at. And certainly I went out with folks who basically said, if you can't verify for me that your wife is okay with this, then I can't date you. And I said, okay, thank you very much. That's all we can do. And then there are people, who got to know me more over time. again, I've gone through various different, dating environments and settings. I mean, when I was traveling for work, and it was very interesting dating as a married man, I can tell you, I almost never hooked up with somebody the first night I met them. Right? As a single person, you hook up with someone the first night you meet them. It's not an uncommon occurrence.
Right.
As a married man, the first night was always spent explaining my situation, having a lovely, intimate but distant conversation and evening, and then letting them walk away thinking they'll never be with me. There's no way they could be with a married man. And then the next day saying, oh, but he's such a sweet guy. I'm just so drawn to him. He's so transparent and honest. We're here for this week. Let's just have some fun. And I watched that cycle repeat, right? So you really needed time to build relationships in dating, in casual dating as a married man, for example. It didn't happen when I was a weekend somewhere or a night or met someone quickly. When dating online, similarly, right? You have to be, I think, put up very clearly what it is you're looking for, and then be patient. I mean, in general, again, dating online, there's 10,000 male posts to every female post. So you have to just wait the 6 months it takes for the person to respond to you, and realize that 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 might actually lead to something, and that most of them will go nowhere. I got a lot of questions from people about poly because I was public about it in my post. Oh, I've been considering open relationships. What do I do? A lot of very, interested people looking for information. Again, oftentimes before the world of podcasting. So I couldn't send them to you. I think now those questions don't come to me anymore. They come to, the internet.
Right.
But, dating, there are definitely tips to dating as a single guy, right? I mean, the biggest one, and this is the biggest thing with dating in general, is confidence. If you have confidence, and I guess not slimy confidence, but confidence
genuine.
Genuine confidence in who you are, in what you want, transparency. That is a huge one. Approach people. If you talk to people, that really helps. Being shy and waiting for them to come to you really doesn't help. It's a numbers game as a singles guy, and as a married guy, even more so. So just accept rejection. It's going to happen 9 times out of 10, and don't be a creep about it. And just move on. And and then we haven't really gotten into this part of the story, but like as I gotten into the swinger scene a little bit, and I've started going to parties, and I see all of these guys who come up to me after events, and I'm not the best looking guy, and I'm not, whatever, and saying, how come at every party you seem to land the girl? What is it that you do that I can't do? And I say, I talk to them. I ask them if they want to play. I put myself in the right position right next to them so that when conversations happen naturally, I'm the one they're talking to. And I compliment them. So, if you can't be subtle as a married guy. I mean, maybe a little early flirting, but at a certain point, you just got to be overt about what you want and about who you are. And just understand that it's only going to work a fraction of the time. But if you put yourself out there, it definitely can work. But you have to have limited expectations. Before I found the swinger scene, I mean, it was, dating online and having, partners on the side. It's not an easy place, and you have to just accept that it's going to be months before you might find the next partner, and you have to build relationships. And, it's not easy to do when you're busy with work and life and family.
Yeah. So it sounds like, well, first off, thank you for sharing all of that and all of those tips and everything. But it sounds like with the swinging scene, it's gotten a little easier for you. Is that correct?
Yes, everyone should go search for the swinging scene if what you're looking for is casual sex. I think it's a wonderful community that, we all thought died out in the 70s, but is still there in every small community across the country. And really provides, a supportive opportunity. I mean, there are some challenges with certain parts of the swinging scene. I mean, it can be a little bit heteronormative. I think it would be nice to queerify that scene a little more. But, if you know where the people are who are looking for people like you, that certainly helps. a couple suggestions for that scene as a single guy. The big one is, again, build a relationship with a woman who's also coming as a single woman. People assume the swinger scene is primarily couples, and then single guys, for the ladies. But there's actually a fair number of single ladies who are also coming to these events, just looking for casual connection and simplicity. And there's a great chance to connect with one or two of them at some of the parties, and then come to them with these parties to them in the future. Just make plans to meet them at these parties. I mean, there's a number of advantages to this one. The first one, for your sake, you become bona fide, right? Any guy who shows up at one of these parties with a woman is already a step above all the random single guys who are out there. Number two, it makes it easier to just meet people. You've got the two of you. It's a little more social. It's a little bit less awkward. For her sake, it becomes a little bit of a shield, a protection from the other single guys. If she's not feeling it that day, she can just, hide behind you. She knows she's got a partner she can play with. She's going to have a good time with. And it also tends to be cheaper because generally the pricing of a lot of these things is the same price for a couple or a single guy. So, she comes for free, or you, whatever, you split it, and it's cheaper for you. So it's a great way to just feel a lot less awkward going into these events. So the scene is good, and then building relationships in that scene. As a single guy, I mean, there are public swinger events and there are closed swinger events. You definitely want to try to get onto the closed swinger list, because those events tend to have less single guys around. The ones that are publicly advertised on FetLife and things like that often have a really high ratio of random single men, and they tend to be non-verified by the hosts. And so there's a higher threshold you have to clear to kind of, impress people. And, and the biggest lesson I've learned, whether it be with the swinger scene or in general, is that we all totally misunderstand Viagra, Cialis, and other male enhancement pills. We've seen all these ads and all this promotion when it came out about how these things are for old men who can't get an erection. And sure, I'm sure it's for them too. But the beauty of these pills is actually not their ability to help you get an erection, but the ability to help you sustain an erection or get an erection again and again and again. It can basically eliminate your refractory period and allow you. I know some people refer to these things as swingers insurance, right? It gets you past that fear of a performance, and it blows my mind actually how few people, when you go to these parties, how few of the guys are enhanced, are superpowered. And kind of, because you can see them wanting more. And I think there's still a stigma against it. And that stigma doesn't exist in the gay male sex party community, as I understand, but so I'm certainly a public service announcement for all you guys out there: get a prescription. I think you guys may even have connections to places, that sponsor you. And try that out. If it's for you, it can really give you the confidence and the experience that you've been looking for.
Yeah, we don't actually have any sponsor, but I would say like the thing that we've often heard and have experienced is like it takes away the mental block, because it can be, especially for me, it's very like there's a lot going on, and so I get in my head, and then that's pretty much the end of it. So yeah, I think all your points are spot on.
It takes a mental block, and just physiologically, right? You're at this sexy party. You've been surrounded by sexy women for hours and all this sexy time. Everyone's doing all this sexy stuff. You finally get to play. Maybe it happens a little faster than you might want because of all that's going on. And yeah, your body doesn't necessarily respond the way you want it to, given that moment. And, I think most people oftentimes want to come back for a round two a little bit later, take a break, whatever, and then come back. And yeah, it can really help your body do what you want it to do, potentially. I don't know how to say this in a not rude way, but I watch all these couples come where, the woman really just wants to get fucked. to be honest, like really wants that, and the husband is unable to perform, and that's where they ask someone like me to come in and team, and this is a lot of fun. I just want to say to him, like, here, take one of these, come back in an hour, you'll be ready to go again, and don't be shy about it. So I do think, it may not be for everybody, but everyone should try it at least once. And again, it's not to get hard. You can get hard. Great. It's to stay hard. It's to alleviate that fear. It's to be able to get hard again and again, whatever it might be. Or it's to give that person that particular extra hard experience that they wanted in that day.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I agree.
Well, and if any sponsors...
No,
go ahead.
I was like, I hope this isn't a little bit too blunt for your show.
No. And I think what's funny about it is, like, it'd be easy for you to be like, no one else try it. Just call Norman for the assistance. But you're definitely here to, like, help out. And I really appreciate that. And I think I loved all of the different tips that you gave, because actually one of the questions I was going to ask you is, like, you said, like, well, I was dating, like, every girl on this block. And it was, I think there's
not every, there were only 3.
But it wouldn't
have mattered if it was everyone.
No, I think there's people listening, and we've heard from these people often. Like, the guys are like, well, we got onto dating apps, and my wife or my girlfriend has 100 messages, and I can't even get a reply from one. And you're here being like, here's what you do. You have to be bold. You have to be confident. You have to talk to them. You have to be kind. You have to be genuine. And also, like, you have to do this a lot of fucking times. Like, you didn't just it wasn't like the first 3 people you reached out to are like, yeah, let's do this. It was probably many, many, many times doing this. And so I think those are all really valuable lessons to take away from this. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. And if any sponsors are listening.
You want Viagra to come sponsor our show?
I'm just kidding.
Sure.
Sure. Well, who knows?
Send the samples over. We'll try them out.
Yeah, sure. Send samples. Let's go.
Here's another tip. You're asking about tips for guys. Married or single, and playing with their partners or without. But again, it comes out of confidence, and that is host. Throw your own events, throw your own parties. It took me a while at the scene looking at all these guys and being like, well, that guy does really well. That guy's like, oh, they're hosting their parties. They're doing the hard work. They're creating those communities. And just more recently in the last year, I started hosting a few small events of my own. And it just allows you to build the space that you want, the kind of people that you're looking for, the kind of energy that you want. And again, if you create the space, then people are more likely to come out of the woodwork. And I found that has been a successful model that I see people endeavor to take on.
Yeah, I think that's
a great tip too.
That's a huge tip. Yeah, I appreciate that as well. And
if something is missing, create it. Yeah. I was curious. You have, you say you have or have had the don't ask, don't tell dynamic with your wife. How open are you with other people in your life about your adventures?
So for a long time, I was fairly closed about it, and mainly out of respect for my wife, who I thought was closed about it. I didn't think that our friends knew, and I didn't think she wanted our friends to know. So I wasn't one really talking about it. So I had a couple of key friends who knew, who would be my go-tos. And aside from that, it really wasn't part of the conversation. A number of years into our relationship, it became clear that she was telling a few key friends and that she was okay with it being out there in our social sphere. And that was certainly a relief to me. So it allowed me to open up more to my friends, because it's a big part of your life. I mean, it's and being closeted in any capacity is a big challenge, emotionally and intellectually. And so having to balance, even just right now in the pandemic, and people are asking me, what is it that you missed most in life? And I'm not going to say to them the swingers parties, but it's the truth, that and travel. what is it you're missing? What is it you're missing in life? And you can't say that to everybody, but we can say that now to more people. And so, no, it has been really nice to be able to open up to our social sphere. And basically most of our close friends now know, because either one or both of us have opened up about, our experience. Either me trying to convince, my friends that they need to have the conversation, or my wife talking it through how she's dealt with it and helping one of the partners on that end. And while it's traditionally the man who's looking to open up the relationship, it's not always the case, certainly. And again, the more time you spend in the swinger scene, the more time you realize there's a lot of really insatiable women who can't be satisfied by one guy, just physiologically. And so we're certainly seeing it, that more talking about it, that some of our female friends also are coming out and saying, I want more, emotionally, physically, whatever it might be. So, we're not yet out to family. We're not yet out to, those kind of levels. But in our social sphere, we were basically out at the moment.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's really great too that like your wife, while she wanted the don't ask, don't tell, was still comfortable talking with other people.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot. Like, I don't know. I think that's great. So
yeah.
Good on her.
Yeah, for sure. I know you have already shared a couple of bloopers, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to share if you have any others as well.
I think my favorite blooper when I was thinking about the story was right after my wedding. I had, been playing, and I had been trying so hard, again, as a married or engaged man, to date. And this is, again, before I discovered the parties and before I discovered FET, and just trying to, fight my way out on trips and on occasional Craigslist connections, things like that. And it was very difficult. And then we got married, and we made this monogamous commitment to each other, which I was excited about. I mean, maybe not excited about the commitment itself, but I was excited about the stage in life we were going into when I was open to that commitment. And then for basically the first time in years, I go away on a work trip, and there's a woman, another married woman, and she's throwing herself at me. She is all over me, draped over me, cuddling on me, and saying to me, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Like, you don't have to worry about this. And I said, no. What happens in Vegas leads to annulment. And I am not willing. Like, this is literally 10 days after my wedding. Like, we got married, and I had to go on a work trip immediately. So we had just made this commitment, this monogamous commitment, and this lifetime commitment. And I had to fend her off, which was a very, very difficult weekend. I was with her through the entire weekend. The good news, I guess, of the story is that a year later, I was back on a similar work trip and back in Vegas again. And she was there as well and very interested in me. And by this point, the year of monogamy had lapsed, and I was open to exploring again. But I have to admit, it was a mediocre encounter. I don't know if that was the buildup. I don't know. I mean, it whatever the situation was, but it did not turn out to be. I mean, I for that year, I was like, waiting, I'm going to see her again, and we're going to have this amazing weekend, and blah blah blah. And it was not.
Was she open with her husband about it?
No, and that was an interesting situation. I shouldn't get into too much of someone else's details, but her husband had gone on a transition. They had drifted apart, and so she was not open about it. But then later, when I met up with her again in a third year, I was like, well, maybe we'll give us another try. There's less anticipation. We'll just have some fun, without a key. But at that point, she was in if you call it that, a monogamous relationship with a lover. So she was only with her lover and her husband.
I got you.
And she was not willing to be with anybody else. And that was the last of our... then we were going to meet up one more time, just for a little bit of fun one time. And I guess this is before that. And that was the night of the big blackout in New York, and flights were all canceled, and we couldn't get to Vegas. And so it's that whole encounter was a series of bloopers. But
Sounds like it.
I love it.
Wow.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And for everything, like, is there anything we haven't touched on that you wanted to make sure to share that we missed in your story and we didn't ask about that you want to get out there? We want to give you the chance to do that before we let you get on with your afternoon.
No, I mean, I think the basic thing I just want to get across to people is that it's never too late to have the conversation about your needs emotionally, sexually, and the reality that no one person can really be all those things. And I was lucky. I went into this conversation. I knew that about myself already, and I was able to have it up front. And I encourage anyone who knows that about themselves to have that conversation up front, because it's going to be a lot easier and a lot less heartache if you put that up front. But even if you go into a relationship, you don't know that about yourself when you first start. When you realize it, you still have 30, 40, 70 years together, and you don't want to be constantly saying, I wish I'd open this up. I wish I had this conversation. You don't want to be resenting each other over your inability to satisfy each other emotionally or sexually. You want to really be able to delve into your partnership and delve into your life together without, I think, those things getting in the way. So have the conversation. Whenever it is, start it. It'll be hard. Don't start it and say, I'm doing this now. Like, give your partner some time to accept it. Let them have their little meltdown like I had at 21. Like, it's going to be hard. It doesn't matter if you're 21 or 45. You're going to feel like there's something wrong with you, and you need to be open to the fact your partner is going to have that response. You need to make sure they understand what it is that you're asking, what it is that you want, why it's important to you, and why it will be helpful for the next 30 years going forward for both of you. And, give them whatever it is, 6 months, a year, 2 years to kind of figure that out before you start really pushing it. But at a certain point, I think if this is important and you want to succeed, I won't say push it, because, you're already committed, you're already in a relationship. But, I think it's going to be something that you're going to want to, a lot of people have the conversation, and then they just don't want to push it over that line. They just don't want to take that extra step. They were uncomfortable with the conversation, so I don't want to force it. And I really, you just need to, at a certain point, once you've given them time to process it, to force the next level and say, all right, now it's time to explore this at whatever level we're comfortable.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, that time is critical. And I mean, if you go back and listen to episode 2, you'll hear Taylor and Ryan talking about, the conversation came up for 10 years before they ever did anything. And so,
way to throw an old episode out there, by the way.
I am always impressed by your ability to know old episodes offhand. It blows my mind every week. Well done.
Sometimes it's better than others, and you're better at it than I am.
But yeah, I think that's super important. It's not going to happen overnight. And especially if your partner hasn't ever thought of this, and who knows, maybe you're like, I've been thinking about this. So yeah, me too, let's do it. But chances are they're going to be like, that's a whole new thing I've never thought about. And that's going to take time for them to process and figure out what they even feel about that. So,
but on the flip side, don't wait too long, because a lot of people have the conversation sit for a while in this hopeful state, but the hopeful state turns to frustration and despair. So, if you're going to let it sit for a long time, really kind of re-examine the conversation and explain to each other why it's still sitting. Because otherwise you're going to have one person very frustrated saying, we had this, we talked about opening and I just can't do it. I just want this, blah, blah, blah. And I think it can build resentment too. So you have to give your partner, a year, a couple years, but at the same time, don't let it sit forever. If you can do it, great. Let it sit as long as you can let it sit. But if it's starting to build resentment in you, don't let it fester.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
totally.
No, I think that's great. Yeah. I think that's all about that open communication, right? And that's hard, right? Because then you're running that risk. You run that risk that you continue to push it, and they're like, no, it's a deal breaker. And then you've got a new decision to make, right? So that's sort of that Dan Savage price of entry, price of admission to the relationship. Somebody somewhere has to give if the two people can't align. And that's hard.
Yeah, and I'd say, in in general, and I really think talking to most of my friends who, I come from a generation still where most people are in monogamous, committed relationships. Most of my friends are married and are monogamous. And if they were closeted and open, they'd let me know because I'm the one person who's open in their life. And, I think, I hear about all the different challenges, right? The diverging sex drives, changing body types, the years after childbirth, when people are just too exhausted. And there's a lot of reasons why good, solid relationships, could use outside sexual or emotional connections. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, to understand how natural that is, and to celebrate it and say, okay, so for this stage, we're going to co-parent. My body belongs to my children. I can't give it to you. So if you want that, go and get that somewhere else, or, whatever it might be. But you also have to be careful, of course, that you're not getting too distracted by the outside, that you're not giving your partner what they need as well. So, my wife and I've had our ups and downs around that, where I want the sexual stuff and I'm getting that somewhere else, and she wants the emotional stuff, and I'm not necessarily giving that to her the way I want, and she's not getting that somewhere else. So I need to, step up my game. So it's always a conversation.
And it's always adjustment, right?
And learning, yeah.
You're
learning,
constantly adjusting as you move down the path together. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Norm, for reaching out again and coming on and sharing everything that you did. It was wonderful hearing your story, and I'm excited to get all of your words of wisdom out there.
Thank you for your podcast. It really is helpful to hear that this is a lot more normalized than it was in my day. And I'm seeing it being more and more normalized in my peers as well, at least the conversation. And I'd like to do my part to help people actually exercise it, actually put it in practice in their relationships, in their lives.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. And it sounds like it still is your day. It sounds like you're doing just fine. So we're happy to hear that the dynamic that you and your wife have set up has evolved multiple times, and it sounds like at maybe the beginning of another exciting stage. So we're happy to hear that.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll come back in a few years and give you the next update.
That
we look
wonderful.
forward to it. And until then, thank you and have a fantastic afternoon.
Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
And we're back. Thank you so much, Norm, for reaching out to us, coming on the show, sharing your story. It was wonderful to talk to you, and we're so excited to get this story out in the world.
Yeah, just echoing Emma's thank you, Norm, and for just your positivity and zest for life. So
yes.
Thank you for that. And listeners, thank you for listening and for showing up. And if you're still listening and you wanted to hear more about that whole Patreon thing Emma was talking about, it is a couple of bucks a month, and we do men's calls, women's calls, a monthly video Q&A, all on Zoom. And we have an ongoing MeWe chat group where the community just kind of hangs out, supports each other, shares pictures, shares stories, supports each other. And it's just fantastic. So again, thank you to everybody who's a part of that community for being a part of it. And if you're interested in it, check it out. Click on the Patreon tab on our website. Again, it's only a couple bucks a month. You can try it for a month. If you don't like it, you can cancel. We don't get too offended. And
just a quick reminder, the dates for July are going to be the July 20th for the women's group, July 21st for the men's, and July 28th for the Q&A. All of those are on our website as well.
And I think that's about it for this week, other than letting you know that next week we have a fantastic conversation with Amy, and we're super excited about that one, as always. So come back next week. And in the meantime, don't forget to send us an email or a voicemail. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of Emma and me.
Wow, you rocked this outro. I didn't say much.
Well, some days that's the way it rolls.
Some days, sometimes that happens. But anyway.
We will see everybody in a week. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
And Emma?
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.